Regularly scheduled programs will not be seen tonight so that we may bring you the NFL football game live and in color.
And the Panthers have a 3rd and 10. Here comes pressure, and they've gotten to him. The ball is out in the end zone, and it's recovered by Malik Jackson for the touchdown. It was Vaughn Miller with the strip sack, and Jackson with the recovery.
Welcome to Basically a Football Show.
Basically a Football Show, the season finale, folks, as we have a Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl 50 over the weekend. No, I mean, if you're listening to this by now, you know who won. With a impressive defensive performance, the Denver Broncos knock off the Carolina Panthers 24-10. And we're going to break it all down start to finish and get into the X's and O's and all that nonsense. I'm Zach. Along with me is Greg. And Greg, for once, you know, people have made fun of our predictions in the past. I think we got this one pretty square on the nose.
You know, we really did. And I hate to pat us on the back, but I'm going to. If you listen to the show we did before, the Super Bowl preview show, watching that game, it was like we wrote the script. Like
defense.
It played out exactly like we said it needed to for the Broncos to win. So, yeah, we got it right. But, Peyton Manning rise up from the sunset just like we predicted, and here we are.
Let's start in the pregame stuff. Anything jump out to you with the pregame festivities of Super Bowl 50, Levi Stadium?
You know, I kind of half paid attention to it and half didn't, so nothing really. I watched a couple of things, but nothing really stuck out to me that I can remember. I thought that it seemed pretty typical. I know CBS has been kind of taking a beating for their coverage of the game itself, but How about you? Anything that you saw that?
I thought it was cool getting all the 50 previous Super Bowl MVPs.
That I liked. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and then I love the fact that Tom Brady came out and was booed mercilessly. I thought that was great.
Yeah. In his hometown area, basically, too, right?
Right, but the whole stadium was pretty much a pro Broncos crowd as far as I could tell.
Yeah,
and the Broncos fans aren't gonna give Tom Brady any slack.
Yeah, he came out. I mean, because he came out, he's like Joe Cool with the sunglasses and all that, which I had no problem with, but. He came out and man, they let him have it, which I was a little surprised by, but not too much. He's not. I was thinking about that when it happened. When Joe Montana was basically what Tom Brady is today, everybody loved him. And but with Brady, you just don't see that. And I understand the cheating stuff and all that.
Yeah, I think it's the cheating stuff. I think it's the Boston stuff. I think it's all that.
But yeah, because like the 49ers, I mean, everybody loved them. But yeah, that was really cool to see. And
And I don't think people had a problem with the 49ers and Bill Walsh as much as they do the Patriots and Bill Belichick.
Right. Definitely a much more likable team, I agree. But, seeing all the Super Bowl MVPs, that was really neat. That was really cool.
Lady Gaga sang the national anthem and definitely hit the over.
Yeah.
As far as the length. So there's prop bet number one.
Was it like 25 seconds over or something like that?
Oh, I don't know the exact number. I just know she took some liberties elongating the notes. But, she did fine, I guess. She wasn't completely Lady Gaga. She was just singing the national anthem. Flyover, neat, and then, of course, you get the kickoff in the sunlight.
Which was awesome. Just loved the fact that a good hour of that game took place in the sunlight. I don't know why we can't have more of that.
Because the games start,
I know.
At too late of a time for the West.
I know, but do you really think that the ratings would get hurt that much if they started the game at, say, 4 instead of 6? I'm just saying.
No, probably not. I mean, it'd be just after lunchtime here, and people could still barbecue and do all that sort of stuff. So,
I guess you got to
kill them.
You got to remember, I'm in the East Coast, so it's a bias thing. We don't really care about you guys out there. So, yeah.
Yeah, we know.
I understand that, for you guys, if you started at 4, it would be a little early. So, okay.
Panthers win the coin toss, defer to the Broncos, and the Broncos receive it. And I thought straight from the get-go, the Broncos came in and they set a tone. Very first play of the game, Peyton Manning, an 18-yard pass, and you thought, okay, that's what we want to see from the Broncos. That's what you want to see from Peyton Manning. And they came out throwing a couple passes, 18 yards, 6 yards, another 22-yard pass down the middle, and the Broncos were steadily moving down the field in their first drive. Got stalled at the Carolina 16, hit the field goal for an early 3-0 lead. But I thought the Broncos came out and set a tone offensively that I don't think we might have expected against that Panthers D, but they showed that they were going to be there and they're going to be somewhat effective.
They came out exactly. They came out and they were there to play. Unfortunately, I'd say this too. I think had they scored a touchdown there, because they really knocked Carolina on their heels right out of the gate. Had they put it in for 7 there, I don't know that the game would have ever even been as close as it was. But they came out and they set the pace right away on offense. And I thought, this is good. Now, they didn't do much after that, but they did show that they could do it. And they just really put Carolina right on their heels. I don't think the Panthers... I think the Panthers went into this game a little overconfident, and
yeah, they didn't seem when they came out though. They didn't seem to have that same swagger that we've seen them play with all season.
Yeah,
they didn't seem like they were ready,
right?
Honestly, but the Panthers get the ball back. They go 3 and out. Denver's defense played. You know, that was just the start, and they played very well all game. Broncos go 3 and out. Very next series, the Panthers start the ball with their own 15, a couple incomplete passes, and then Von Miller started his MVP performance, coming around the edge, stripping Cam Newton the ball, not just stripping him, literally ripping the ball out of his hands. Just met him chest to chest, pulled the ball out of his hands.
Yeah.
Jackson recovered the fumble in the end zone for the 10-0 lead, and I think right then and there, that was the end of this game.
Yep.
Was Von Miller coming around and destroying Cam Newton there, and really putting the Panthers 10 points down on the Broncos. And you knew that if that defense was doing this now, they were going to play like this all game. They were going to come to play for the rest of the 4 quarters.
Again, I'm going to break my arm, patting us on the back, but when we talked about this game last week, we said that what the Broncos needed to do was they had to come out, get out early, and not let Carolina get into that rhythm they got into against like the Cardinals or against God, who'd they play in the first round? I can't even remember now. This is terrible.
Seahawks.
Against the Seahawks. They couldn't let that happen. They didn't. And when he scored that, when Miller got that sack and they scored the touchdown, it was like, this is exactly what Denver needed to do. And I agree with you. I thought the game was over at that point. Carolina just literally did not know what hit them at that point. It was just like, that's it. And wow, what a game Von Miller had. Wow.
Yeah, that was just the start of 2.5 sacks on the day and 2 forced fumbles, and we'll get to the second one in a bit. Again, Panthers continue to just punt by each team, but the Panthers get the ball back in the second quarter, and they finally get something moving towards the end of the first quarter. Running the ball wasn't the most effective all game, but Cam Newton found some room there for some passing down the field, and Jonathan Stewart ran in from 1 yard out to bring the game within 3 points, 10-7. But it was still a struggle for the Panthers to really start to get moving, and I didn't think they were even going to get in when they were at the goal line. Honestly,
yeah, they got back in it, but you know what? I never felt like they were even back in it, even when it was at 10-7. They just didn't do anything that made me think that they could maintain an offense against that Denver defense. It was just an amazing performance by the Broncos, but it did get close for a little bit. But I don't know. I never thought that the Broncos were really ever in any real danger to do.
No, not really. Because, again, the defense, I thought no matter what, the defense was still going to keep them close in this game. The Panthers were never going to pull away at any point. So teams exchange punts again. Broncos get a field goal late in the second quarter to go up 13-7, up by 6, and again the Panthers' other problem in this game, it wasn't just Cam Newton getting hounded. The Panthers turned the ball over several times.
Yeah,
they fumble inside at the 50. And Mike Tolbert fumbles. Broncos get the ball right back. But then the Broncos, they start to move, and it looks like they're going to go in and really put a stamp on this game. Because, again, the offense looked fine early on in this game for them. And they go down, and an interception by Coney Ely for the Panthers, a really athletic play, reached up, pulled it down. He was if the Panthers had come back in this thing, he would have been the MVP. He had 3 or 4 sacks. Yep. And this interception that it kept Denver out of the end zone and kept things close for the Panthers if they wanted to try and make this comeback attempt. And I thought early on that could have been a big play if the Panthers could find some mojo as we went into halftime. Well,
like you said, if we gave an MVP award to the losing team too, he would have won it. That would have been his MVP award. A lot of people, I think in the moment you think, wow, this is a really great game, but it wasn't. There was a lot of tension, but it wasn't a well-played Super Bowl by any definition. Neither team really, and I think it's a credit to both defenses that, there were turnovers, and neither team could really get any kind of momentum going on offense. But at the end of the day, it was just Denver. That defense was just spectacular.
Before we go into the second half, I completely forgot one of the other turning points in this game. Right before
the catch.
Right before the fumble return touchdown by Miller and Malik Jackson, the Panthers' first offensive play on that drive looked like it was going to be a deep pass down the middle that Kotry looked to have maybe pulled in, but they ruled it incomplete on the field. Now, when they went to replay, I initially thought that they were going to overturn it because it looked like he had his hand under the ball, and yeah, the nose of the ball did touch the ground, but I still thought that he had some control on it, and they would have given it to him, but they didn't find enough evidence to overturn the call on the field, so the ruling stood with an incomplete pass, and then insult to injury, 2 plays later, it's a fumble recovery into the end zone. So instead of the Panthers marching down the field, they're down 10-0, and I think that really compounded how big of a turning point that was early on in the football game.
Absolutely, and as far as the catch itself goes, first off, poor Mike Carey. His one shot in the whole game, he's positive it's going to be overturned, and it wasn't. I'm still trying to figure out what they didn't see that led them to rule that was an incomplete pass. The only thing I can think of is that Kotry never seemed to have total 100% of control of the ball the whole way down, but I thought he had more than enough control to call it a catch.
That's what I thought too, but I guess they thought that he didn't have enough of control and that the nose of the ball hit the ground and that aided him in making the catch. But again, it's also important to remember that they said the call stands.
Right.
So they called it an incomplete pass on the field when in real time I thought it was a catch. In real time I thought it was a catch.
I did too, yeah. I did too.
To rule it incomplete was surprising to me. And then for them to go into replay, then you have the problem of, well, there's not enough evidence to overturn it. Maybe it was a catch, but they couldn't say 100% without a doubt that he had full control of that football when he rolled on the ground.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could think of that it could have been, is that he just – and again, with the catch rule being what it is today, I don't know – it's like an 8-page book, that you have to read to figure it out.
Right.
But all I could come away with was that he just never maintained what I would have called like 100% full control of the ball. It's the only reason I could think of that you wouldn't overturn that. And I guess – that's what they saw, too. But I would have called it a catch. I thought it was a catch. In real time, I thought it was a catch in the replay, too. And, yeah, that hurt the Panthers a lot because, like you said, the next play, they're down 10-0.
Going into the second half, the Panthers would open with the football and with the defensive stop late in the second quarter, only down by 6, an opportunity maybe to get closer in this game and really lock things up here against the Broncos. They marched down the field. They came out passing, and I thought that maybe Carolina had found their groove to get things moving and maybe start to put some fear into the Broncos. And they get down to the Denver 26, go for the field goal, and Graham Gano hits it off the top of the right upright, and it bounces out. And I think when you see something like that, too, compounded with just the turnovers and mistakes we saw from the Panthers, I think at that point you say maybe today's just not their day.
Yeah.
Today is not going to be the Panthers' day in this game.
They had – it wasn't easy for them like it was in the playoffs. It was easy. I mean, let's be honest about it. It was easy for them against Seattle. They took their foot off the gas, and we saw what happened. And it was ridiculously easy against the Cardinals. So when was the last time this team actually played a tough game where they had to really be in it?
Probably the one they lost to Atlanta.
Probably, yeah. And that was back in like week 13, 14, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So this team hadn't played a game where they really had to just buckle down and get the job done in a long time. And things like a missed field goal and the strip sack and all that, when you haven't played up, when you haven't had to really like put forth a maximum effort to beat a team, those things add up quick. And it just wasn't their day. I think you're right. I don't know if these teams play 10 times, if the Panthers don't win 6 of them, but they weren't going to win on Sunday.
And I think what you mentioned there, it not being easy, was something Peyton Manning had said in the postgame, that also, throughout the playoffs and for the majority of the season, the Panthers had been rolling people over. And
right.
It was so easy. And then they start off the game with a little adversity. They get punched in the mouth by the Broncos D. The Broncos offense is moving the ball well enough to get them a slight lead. And then the Panthers are kind of in this mode of, well, what do we do? Mm-hmm. We haven't done this before. We have to really fight in this game. And I don't know. And I think that goes back to their mentality coming in. I don't know if they were ready for it. As much as Cam Newton has all this swagger and stuff, I didn't see, even though he was obviously beat up pretty early, he didn't even seem like he started out the game like being, I'm Cam Newton, I'm here and I'm going to play my game and we're going to score touchdowns and I'm going to dab all over the field. He looked a little tight, if anything.
It's happened a lot of times too. Now, this is the Panthers' second Super Bowl appearance, but really the first with this crew, with Ron Rivera.
Yeah.
And you see it. I mean, I can go back over the years, a team that looked really good coming out of the playoffs, and you go, wow, they're just going to be tough to beat. And they get to that first Super Bowl, and people can say what they want about whether it's a big game or not. I don't care who you are. When you step onto that field and it's the Super Bowl, it's got to be different than any other football game you've ever played. I mean, there's just no way it's not, right? And I think sometimes it's just, I think that they maybe were a little tight. They hadn't had to really work hard to beat anybody in a while, and the Broncos had the experience. They'd just been there, 2 years prior, right? Mm-hmm. 3, something like that. But yeah, it's just
2 years. Yeah,
they weren't themselves, and I think that sometimes you got to realize it's the Super Bowl. The guys that you're playing on the other side of the ball, they didn't draw a winning lottery ticket to get here. They played their way into this thing too, and they're pretty good. And I think maybe the Panthers just kind of came in a little overconfident, a little tight. And you can't do that against a good football team like the Broncos, especially with that defense. And I think that it hurt them in the long run, yeah.
So the very next drive, the Broncos, they take advantage of that missed field goal. They march down the field. Again, the offense not the most effective of any Super Bowl champion we've ever seen. And there's been a lot of stats that this is the worst Super Bowl offense of all time. And Peyton Manning was the worst Super Bowl quarterback of all time coming into this game, statistically. But here's the thing. Nobody's going to remember that.
No.
Because the Broncos did what they needed to do. They marched down the field here. They get a field goal, and they're up by 9. They make it a 2-score game, and that, again, elongated the distance. And the Panthers were really ice skating uphill all day against this Broncos defense. So a 2-score differential was going to be a big problem. And the Panthers tried to come back on the very next drive, and Cam Newton throws an interception down the middle, tipped off the hands of Ted Ginn, I believe, and T.J. Ward picks up the ball. He actually fumbled it on the return, and you thought, oh no! But the Broncos were able to recover there inside their own 10. But
when T.J. Ward, when he went down to a knee, I thought, just stay down, because you could just see it coming. You knew he was going to fumble if he got up and tried to run.
Yep.
But back to Peyton Manning for a second. Yeah, he might have had the worst quarterback day in the history of the Super Bowl. That's all well and good. But when you're in a game like that, and what you need to get out of the way, let your defense play, and not make mistakes, who would you rather have in that position in a game like that than Peyton Manning? Yeah. And he may not have played well, but he played smart, and that sometimes is enough.
Right. And to Peyton's credit and to the offensive coordinator's credit, they didn't do anything outside of what he was able to do.
Right.
They didn't try to push it. They didn't start having him heave balls downfield. They didn't make Peyton start running an option offense. He stayed in the pocket, had short to intermediate passes, and just kind of took chunks. And if it wasn't there, it wasn't there. They weren't going to complain over it, because the defense was playing so well. They knew they were going to have another opportunity to take some clock off and move the ball down the field.
I was just going to say, there might be 3 quarterbacks in all the NFL right now that could go into a game where things just aren't going well like that and still manage to pull it off. He's one of them, and I'd say maybe Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers is the other 2. And I think you put a guy like, I'm trying to think of a quarterback off the top of my head that, well, let's use Ryan Fitzpatrick, for example. With the offense playing the way the Broncos' offense was playing, you put Fitzpatrick in that position, he's going to make 3 turnovers and you're going to lose the game. That's the difference between Peyton Manning and anybody else. That's why, even though he didn't play well, you can't say, well, he didn't do anything to help that team win the Super Bowl, because that's nonsense.
Going to the fourth quarter, the Coney Ealy again makes his name heard, sacks Peyton Manning, forces a fumble and recovers it at the 50, gets the Panthers into a decent field position. They march down and get a field goal to make things back to a 1-score game, 16-10. And you felt the game kind of tightening up, and maybe this is where the Panthers would finally put themselves together, get that offense going. Cam Newton could be dynamic and put something up there, but the Broncos defense held pat. 3 and out. Another 3 and out that ended in a fumble, and that fumble was inside the Carolina 25. The Broncos took it 3 plays. C.J. Anderson runs into the end zone for a touchdown, and then we get the 2-point conversion. Peyton Manning makes his one big play in the Super Bowl, finding Benny Fowler in the end zone for the 2-point conversion to put Denver up 14 late in this game, and that was lights out. That was there's 3 minutes left in the game, and they're up by 2 touchdowns. The Broncos defense is smelling blood. They're going to put it all out there. There are 3 minutes left in their season, and a 14-point deficit was going to be just far too much. That was the nail in the coffin. Yeah, absolutely. And when they punched it in for that last CD and they went up 14, there was just
I wasn't too concerned. I mean, Carolina's got the type of offense where they can do a quick strike thing and get right back in the game. But that was basically their only hope at that point in the game. Even when they were just down 7, that was their only hope, was to try to just a big strike again or somebody get loose in the secondary, because you weren't going to do it with a drive. It just wasn't going to happen. And when the Broncos went up 14, I thought, this is it. And I just I can't say enough about the Broncos defense. It was better than I thought it was watching them play that day. It was just amazing what they did. Just amazing.
Yep. The defense was the story, and for the 41st time in 50 Super Bowls, the team with the better defense wins the game. Broncos win 24-10. Peyton Manning goes off in the sunset, hopefully, with his second Super Bowl victory. End of the game, he goes, he's marching up to go celebrate, kisses Papa John on the cheek, runs up to the podium, says he's going to drink some Budweisers, and Peyton Manning being Peyton Manning, he's a marketing machine. You got to give it to him there too. Yeah,
but, he should be a NASCAR driver, because he was pulling off those sponsorships like nobody's business.
Yeah, it was great today wearing the Nike cleats. I didn't think there, but the Gatorade team behind me fueled us up pretty well, and
right.
Papa John's there at the end of the game for me. Yeah,
a lot of people had, I guess, a problem with that. It didn't really bother me that much. I mean, was it the coolest thing he could have done? Probably not.
No,
but I didn't have a big issue.
Put John on the sideline in the first place. Like, come on.
Well, that bugs me.
There.
Yeah.
The Budweiser thing, I don't think he was trying to plug Budweiser. I just think he's like, me and my buddies, we're going to go drink some Buds.
Well, and the thing, too, is that I'm pretty sure that, maybe I'm wrong, I thought Budweiser was the official beer of the NFL. So, if anything, he was plugging the league. But I didn't have a lot of people are like, he's, ever the pimp to the end and all that. It's like, oh, come on. But the thing that, and I brought this up earlier on the boards, and I'll say it again here, the thing that bugs me the most about this is that now all of a sudden, Peyton Manning is going. Everything that every knock against him went away. Yeah. And are you really going to tell me that he was better after that game than he was before it? That just drives me nuts. Yeah, he's got the 2 Super Bowl rings now, so you can't hang that on him anymore. But did he really do anything to solidify his legacy other than win that game?
In terms of his skills as a player and what he's been as a quarterback, no. But in terms of the hierarchy, when we go to rank the hierarchy of best quarterbacks, they're ultimately judged on whether they won or lost. Uh-huh. And he now has 2 Super Bowl rings.
Right. But and I'm glad. I mean, believe me, and I'm really happy, because that ends the argument once and for all. They can shut up now.
And I think the other thing that goes along with that, though, is, in the here and now, people can still say, well, he was with the worst Super Bowl quarterback of all time. And the offense didn't win in that game. It was the defense. But here's the thing. In 3-4 years, when we're, discussing legacies or talking about him going to the Hall of Fame, no one's going to talk about that. They're going to say 2-time Super Bowl champion Peyton Manning. Right. They're not going to say 2-time Super Bowl champion, but that second time, and he only got 100 yards of passing, and, the defense carried him. But, look, with what Peyton Manning has done, and I had first-hand knowledge of this, seeing him all those years in Indianapolis, the amount of times he's carried a team to victory, and the amount of times where it's all been put on his shoulders, and the defense wasn't good enough, and the rest of his supporting cast wasn't good enough, and it was all up to him whether or not the team was going to be a championship team or not. It was kind of refreshing for once in his career to have the rest of his team carry him.
Yeah. I agree.
Like, for once, he didn't have to do it all himself. It really establishes that football is such a team game.
Right, exactly.
And yes, the quarterback is the star, and he gets a win-loss record next to his name. But, when you step back and look at all the intangibles, it's not, Peyton Manning did so much to carry teams season after season after season, and was always let down by – his defense was unable to stop a team late in the game, or he had to be in a shootout because he had to outscore the other team, or he made a mistake and his team wasn't able to say, hey Peyton, you made a mistake, but we're here to back you up. The Broncos defense this season, and especially in these playoffs and in the Super Bowl, was able to do it. Like, maybe The offense still had to score a couple points. The defense could force all those turnovers, and the defense only scored the 1 touchdown. So it could have been a 10-7 game. That would be terrible. But they still did enough to capitalize on their opportunities and put up 24 points. The offense put up 17 points in this game for the Broncos, which is maybe more than some people would have given them before the game.
I agree with you there, too. Two things that I want to bring up. You talk about in 3 or 4 years, we won't remember the performance he had. And, I'm going to give you a really good example of that. I think it was last week, 30 for 30 debuted with the new documentary about the 85 Bears. Mm-hmm. You ask anybody that was around or that has any knowledge of that Bears team, the first thing they're going to say to you is it was an incredible defense, and it was. No question about it. What people forget, and I've forgotten this completely, that team and that season, 1985, they were the number 2 offense in the NFL. And no one remembers that because it was all about the defense. So you're right. When the time comes in 3 or 4 years and we're looking back, we're not going to remember that Peyton Manning didn't have a great day. We're just going to remember that he won the Super Bowl. So, yeah. And the other thing I wanted to bring up really quick, too, while we're talking about him, did he put up 350 yards passing and 4 touchdowns? No, but he was smart, and that's what he needed to do. And that's what makes him a great quarterback. He said, you know what, this is what we need to do to win the game. He did exactly that, and he's got his second Super Bowl ring. You can't knock that. Yeah.
I mean, each quarterback had an interception. Peyton had 1 fumble. Cam had 2. It definitely wasn't about the quarterbacks in this game. It was a defensive game.
Absolutely.
From Peyton threw for 141 yards, in interception, no touchdowns. Cam threw for 265. But would you say he had the better day?
No.
No, I mean Cam was sacked 6 times to Peyton's 5.
No,
so you look at the numbers and the yardage is a little bit better, but they both averaged around 6 yards per reception. Neither had a touchdown. They both threw an interception. They both had fumbles. They were both sacked plenty of times. I mean, if you look at the numbers for like the quarterback rating, not that matters. Peyton actually had a slightly better quarterback rating, but again, it doesn't matter.
Right. It was all about the defenses, and I will say it was. I don't think anybody expected Denver to go in there and just light up the scoreboard. No. I think everybody thought 24 points probably wins them that game, and that's exactly what they scored. So I think Denver did exactly what we thought they were going to do. I think where things went in a different path than people thought is that I don't know that anyone saw them shutting down that Carolina offense to the extent that they did. I think that's the big difference here. And, Carolina's got a good defense, but Denver scored about the amount of points we thought they were going to. Carolina couldn't do anything. Simple as that.
No. Yeah.
And they were doing it. I mean, this wasn't like a 46 defense like the Bears or anything. It was just like a pass rush they just couldn't get away from. And
I think we talked about it against the Patriots, and it extended into this game. The Broncos didn't have to blitz.
No.
It was the down 4, DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller, those guys rushing the ends.
Yeah.
That you could drop everybody else back in coverage. Cam had nowhere to throw. The line was doing his job where he didn't even have lanes to escape and run and beat Cam Newton, and he just was waiting there for DeMarcus Ware or Von Miller to come strip him.
Yeah. I mean,
it was one of the most impressive defensive performances I've seen in a Super Bowl. Right up there with the 2000 Ravens and the Buccaneers when they won too.
Yeah, the Giants against the Patriots. But I think what you see here is a pattern. A team that can rush the passer, that has a good pass rush, is really tough to beat. And it was just
and because Carolina couldn't run the ball effectively.
No,
really.
I think Stewart had 7 yards all day.
Let's see. Stewart had 29 yards.
Oh, okay.
Cam Newton's actually the leading rusher, 45 yards on 6 attempts. But if Cam Newton's your leading rusher, some days that's good when he has 100 yards. But 45?
No.
And, John Stewart, 29. Fozzie Whitaker, 26. Mike Tolbert, 18. Combined, they rushed 118 yards. But C.J. Anderson on his own had 90 yards on 23 carries.
Yeah.
And that was the total of the Broncos' rushing offense. Ronnie Hillman had 0 yards on 5 attempts, but still, the pace of the game was dictated by the Denver Broncos. Right,
absolutely, right from the start.
The offense came out in those first couple drives, was not blowing anybody away, but was effective enough to get down the field and get points. And then the defense, set the tone the other direction by hounding Cam Newton on that first drive.
Talking about Newton for a second, if you looking at that game, I mean, you could tell that the pass rush was getting to him pretty early on because some of the passes, I mean, he was overthrowing receivers by 10 yards. Mm-hmm. He wasn't close to anything accurate. And it was just like we said last week. What the Broncos needed to do was come in and control the tempo of that game, even just long enough to get Carolina out of their rhythm. That's exactly what they did. And once they did that, once they knocked them off their feet, basically it was done. They couldn't get back up and find a way to get back into the game.
And the longer the game went on, the more frustrated Cam looked. Every single time he got hit on the ground. There was one time where it was a 3rd and 24, I think, and he got hit in the end zone. And he kind of looked up at the referee and wanted like a passer or a roughing the passer. And he looked like a 5-year-old child in a way. He just did one of those things where, like, you know, your body goes all stiff and just and throws him, like, rolls himself on the ground. Like he threw a little tantrum, like, I didn't get the call. And there's another one where I think it was the field goal that missed, where he was just kind of laying there and throws himself back on the ground, like, oh no,
yeah,
just. You know,
he did not have a good weekend in any area, really.
Yeah, and it extended into the post game.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a lot said about that already, but I think it's of two things. One, yes, he should have stuck in there and just answered the questions and be the professional football player he's supposed to be. But I also put blame on the NFL for how it was set up. Because did you see what happened with him being able to hear the Broncos?
No.
The rooms were set up in a way, I think they were like literally back to back almost with like a divider. And you could see Cammy sitting there, and then you could hear the C.J. Harris, defensive back for the Broncos, in the other room. And you see Cam Newton kind of turn his head up and kind of tilt like that face somebody makes
right.
Or they're listening for something, and you hear C.J. Harris in the background saying, "Oh yeah, we knew we just had to force them to throw the football, and we said, hey, can you throw the football?" And they didn't, and we beat them, and that's what our game plan was today, and we beat them exactly how we wanted to. And as soon as he hears that, he's like, you know what, I'm done. I can't sit here and listen to this garbage. So he got up and left. So I don't blame him. I take some of the blame from him, but at the same time, you're going to have losses. And I know what he said the other day is like, you know, I lost the biggest game of my life. I'm a sore loser. Show me a good loser, and I'll show you a loser. But you know what, Cam? Your head coach, Ron Rivera, went up there and answered the questions. He wasn't pleased. The rest of your Panthers teammates weren't pleased. Josh Norman, for God's sakes, he was on TV, on camera when the game ended, bawling his eyes out on the field that he lost the game. But he still went up and did his duty.
Well, you know, you want to talk about that. I mean, Peyton Manning, they got beat 40-something to 8 in the Super Bowl a couple years ago by the Seahawks. Mm-hmm. You didn't see him ducking out.
Right.
You know, you didn't see Brady ducking out when the Giants beat him twice. You didn't, I mean, you know, God forbid I'm about to say something nice about Russell Wilson, but he didn't bail out when they lost last year. You know, look, I get that you're frustrated and all that, but if you're going to celebrate the way you celebrate, you've got to be willing to stand in there and take the punches when you lose. And he has just clearly shown that he is not willing to do that.
Right, and I understand, Cam, that he's a emotional player, and you can be a sore loser and whatever, and you don't like to lose. But here's the thing: if you're going to be the sore winner all the time that you are, when you celebrate for every first down and you dab and you do your Superman pose and you're dancing around and you're handing out footballs and everything's going Cam Newton's way, when you lose, it's people are going to come back on the other side and expect you to have some sort of like, so how are you going to handle this? And when you handle it poorly, like he did, you know, I think some people forget too, like with how Cam came along in the season. You remember when he first came in the league and the Panthers were bad? Mm-hmm. How people said that he was, you know, enigmatic and kind of kept to himself and was a loner and, you know, was a bad malcontent, and people were frustrated with him as a player that, you know, he was showing a bad attitude. That all changed when the Panthers start winning and everything's a good time. And look at Cam, he's having so much fun. But people forget that he had a bad attitude when he came into the league and the Panthers started to lose too.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you got, like you said, if you're going to celebrate and you're going to do all that stuff, that's fine. I have no problem with any of that. But you cannot act like a petulant child when you lose. And he did poorly, I mean, with the entire world watching, more or less, in that post-game press conference. He blew it. And then he came back, was it yesterday or Monday? I don't remember which day. And it just and threw some more dirt. You know, I mean, it was like, when you're in a hole, don't keep digging. And that's what he just kept doing. And it's just,
He also said something along the lines of like, you know, don't anybody, you know, criticize me like that because my expectations are always going to be greater than yours. Like, that's not the point,
no,
Cam.
He just doesn't get it.
The point is you're a professional athlete. And part of being a professional athlete or a pro anything in sports, in anything that's covered by media, it's your responsibility to talk with the media. You may not like it. There's plenty of guys that don't, but you're still required to sit there and answer the questions. And even if he still sat there and did the things that he did, where he said, "Got outplayed," no, yes, no, we got outplayed. He sucks. Yeah. And if he just did that the whole time, people would be like, he was mad. He was very mad that they lost the game. But if you had sat there for the required time until somebody said, "Okay, Cam, you can go," then that'd be it.
Yeah.
Or even you just explain what you're feeling a little bit. You can be mad, but talk. Hell, if you're really that mad, throw out some expletives. Be interesting.
Right.
People would like if you were a passionate loser rather than just a sullen loser.
Yeah.
Right.
He just, I'm just thinking back over the years. Scott Norwood, kicker for the Bills, he missed a kick and cost his team a Super Bowl. I don't know how much more dejected a guy could be after a game than that. Went up there and took the questions. It's just over the years there have been guys that have lost in much more heart-wrenching fashion than he did on Sunday, and still stood there and answered the questions. And I just don't think he didn't come across well at all. And unfortunately for him, he was in a position where had he handled this right, he could have been like the next big name in the NFL. I mean, just the next guy that we're getting sick of watching Papa John's commercials with Cam Newton instead of Peyton Manning type of guy, and he just totally threw that away. I think.
Well, and think back to even last season. The Seahawks are on the precipice of winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
With no time remaining, and Russell Wilson throws an interception. Now, we obviously have our opinions about Russell Wilson and how he speaks, but he knows that he has to play the game too.
Yeah.
He has to go out there and answer questions. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but he probably said something dumb like God told me to throw the interception. But the fact is he still went up there and answered the questions. And I think did Marshawn Lynch talk last year? Or did he not?
I don't remember. I
think I remember him going to the media and speaking still.
But nobody expects Marshawn Lynch to say anything. That's the thing. Marshawn Lynch isn't out there when they're winning, running his mouth.
Even when they're winning, he doesn't want to talk to people.
Right, exactly. So if he's not talking after a loss, it's no different than when he's after a win. He's the same guy. But I like Cam Newton as a player, but I tell you, and then I watched you asked me about the pregame earlier. I watched an interview with him and James Brown that I didn't think he came across real well in that either. He tried, but he just, I don't know. But it was an unfortunate way for the weekend to end for him. I mean, he lost, and he came out, and he just made himself look even worse. And, that's just the way it goes.
Several records were set in this game, of course, with Peyton Manning winning. He's the first quarterback to win a Super Bowl with two different teams. He's also the oldest quarterback to start the Super Bowl, as we already talked about. He's the oldest quarterback to win the Super Bowl. Other records that were set, the longest punt return in a game. Jordan Norwood had a 61-yard return. It's amazing that there's never been a punt return for a touchdown in 50 Super Bowls now, when that's something that you think would happen kind of regularly.
But you know what? I thought about that for a second, and it does seem kind of weird. And so you put it in perspective of, like, let's say in a 4-week stretch in an NFL season, there's, I don't know, whatever it would come out to be, about 50 games. Mm-hmm. How many punt returns are there, for touchdowns? There's not that many. So, I mean, it's kind of amazing, but yeah. But I thought I could have swore that there was one one of the it wasn't Devin Hester, but I could have sworn there was a punt return for a touchdown. I had no idea there'd never been one. So
Devin Hester returned the opening kickoff.
Right, the kickoff.
And even a couple of years ago, Jacoby Jones returned a kickoff for a touchdown for the Ravens.
Yeah.
So the kickoffs have been returned, but no punts.
Yeah,
that's the other thing is you've had kick returns, just no punts.
Yeah.
You've had interception. I mean, hell, remember the Steelers and Cardinals? James Harrison had a 99-yard interception return.
Yeah.
You can have all that, but you've never had a punt returned?
Yeah. It is kind of strange.
Things that are set to be returned. So, anyway. Most sacks in a game for both teams, a combined 12 by the Panthers and Broncos. And fewest total yards for a winning team, 194 for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, well, you know what? They still had the most points at the end of the game. That's all that matters.
Super Bowl records that were tied in the game. Coney Ealy with 3 sacks. Most sacks for a player in the game since 1982. Most fumble recoveries. Danny Trevathan had 2 fumble recoveries for the Broncos. Most touchdowns, fumble recoveries in a game. Malik Jackson, the 1, of course. 2-point conversions, 1, and most game played by a team, that'd be Denver. So a little interesting.
Most games, like most Super Bowl appearances?
Super Bowl appearances.
Well, how many does that make for them now? 8?
8.
I thought. They tied that. They tied that.
They tied it. Yeah, those were records that were tied.
Okay, all right.
The last couple I read. Peyton Manning. We talked about his legacy a little bit, but what's his legacy deal? He's the guy that gets to go to Disneyland the day after. Which, by the way, only the second time since the campaign started in 1987 they didn't run a "I'm going to Disneyland" ad after the game.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't
Peyton
catch that.
do it.
Wow. Okay.
Peyton didn't run it, and the last time they didn't do it was the year after the Janet Jackson incident. And I don't know why they didn't do it that. I mean, I think it was probably just a thing at that time of, we don't want any risk with like something live happening.
Yeah, really.
You think with the money in the game and it's Peyton Manning, I think he could turn to a camera and say, "I'm going to Disneyland." Like, that's what Peyton Manning does. Or was the kissing Papa John and shilling out Budweiser too many ads for him post-game?
Well, honestly, it might be an endorsement conflict. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be with Disneyland or Disney World, but
no, I mean, because they've always done that since Phil Simms in '87.
Yeah. Actually, just a sidetrack really quick. If you're interested at all in that Disneyland thing, on Sports Illustrated's website, they have a really cool story about the whole history of that thing, and it's a very interesting read. But as far as Peyton Manning goes, what's his legacy? It's the same as it was, Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock.
And he's done, right?
He's got to be. But he's
there's no way. Like, this is the perfect way. The only bad things can happen after this point if he wants to come back.
Well, I mean, look, he made a lot. He played very smart in the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. But if it wasn't obvious to everyone that he's done, that he's just not what he used to be, then I don't know what to tell him. He needs to just ride off into the sunset. I appreciate the fact that he didn't make it about himself and make the announcement right there at the game. I thought that was a really classy move on his part. Mm-hmm. But don't come back. Don't you know what? Because right now our lasting memory of you is winning the Super Bowl, kissing Papa John, talking about Budweiser, and going home. Do you really want to come back next year and play for like a team like the Texans and end up going 7-9 and getting your ass kicked all season?
Well, I've heard the team that's been pursuing him is the Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Which, Peyton Manning as a Los Angeles Ram would be pretty cool 10 years ago.
It'd be the same as Joe Namath as an LA Ram.
Right, exactly. Or Johnny Unitas as a Charger. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say it's Joe Montana as a Chief. I think Joe Montana as a Chief would be Peyton Manning as a Bronco.
Right.
Type thing. But it's those one-year stints where it's like, oh, really?
Emmitt Smith as a Cardinal. That type of thing. Yeah. You just don't want to see it.
as a Jet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think he should stop. What else has he got to prove at this point?
Nothing.
Nothing.
The only thing he could possibly do is, if he gets that third Super Bowl, then he's really up there in the pantheon with some of the greats. But I thought we had all kind of conferred that he just needed the 2.
Yeah.
Winning 2 makes you different,
right? And
because as opposed to being 1 and 3 in Super Bowls, he's 2 and 2.
Yeah.
You're an even 500. You have 2. You have the same amount as your brother. You're up there. Only a few quarterbacks ever won 2. You're the first to win 2 with different teams, and of course, every record known to mankind from an NFL passing quarterback in your name. So
he needs. I imagine he will. I think that Tony Dungy told him don't make a decision in the heat of the moment. I think that was good advice. Now Tony needs to get on the phone and say, "Okay, Peyton, now I'm going to advise you again. Call it a day. Go home." He can do whatever he wants at this point. If he wants to go into coaching, that's there for him. If he wants to become
coaching,
an analyst,
media,
that's there.
Maybe he just wants to sit back and collect those Papa John's checks.
Right. He can still do endorsements. There's no need to come back. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't put yourself in a Rams uniform and make us remember you that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what I think. But as far as his legacy goes, I thought he was one of the greatest of all time before Sunday, and I still think he's one of the greatest of all time after Sunday. Nothing changed. I'm glad he got that second ring because that shuts up all the idiots that don't know the difference, and that's fine. So I'm happy about that.
I agree. Going forward, the Broncos are going to need a quarterback unless they go with Brock Osweiler into next season.
Well, that's an interesting situation.
Von Miller is a free agent as well.
He's going to get the franchise tag, I think.
Probably.
But that's an interesting situation, though. You're the Broncos, okay? They're not going to want Peyton back at the money he's making. Let's be honest about that.
No, if Peyton comes back, it's not with Denver.
No.
It wouldn't be.
Now you got Osweiler, who is essentially, showed that he can play a little bit. And
he's a free agent, too. They got to re-sign him.
Uh-huh.
So, potentially somebody could offer Brock Osweiler the planet.
Well, there's talk that the Cleveland Browns want to offer him the planet, which, first off, the two reasons he doesn't want to do that. First, it'll kill his career. The Broncos are in an interesting spot. They've got their quarterback, is he of the future or whatever, but the guy that they've got right now they have to rely on is a free agent, and an all-world defensive player is, a free agent too. Which one do you go with? Do you do both? Can you do both? That's the question here. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Denver Broncos.
For the Panthers, I mean, they're still good. Cam Newton's still going to be there. They're going to be contenders in the South again next year. And assuming that they bring the majority of this team back, they'll be right up there with anybody else in the NFC. You'd have to think. It's always a question of, people say, oh, well, Cam's young and the defense is fine. They'll be back someday. And people always say that. But Dan Marino got to the Super Bowl in his first season. Never played in another one.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Colin Kaepernick and the 49ers a couple of years ago, when they got to the Super Bowl, they'll be back. This Kaepernick's dynamic and all that stuff. Where are they now? What's the future hold for the Panthers in your estimate?
Well, I mean, like you said, looking at it on paper, they should be back. They should be right in the thick of it again. But, I was listening to Bill Simmons yesterday, and he said this team has made it to the Super Bowl, going to have a season from hell regression written all over it for next year. So who knows? I mean, and remember too, this team essentially the same cast of characters went 7-8-1 the year before this. So I mean, they're capable of going in either direction. I'd like to think they're going to be back and be good again, but I honestly don't know. I mean, they could be just as bad too. So it'll be interesting.
And you have to, but again, the NFL is also a place where people learn. That once you go through them once, it's going to be hard to go through them again the second time. And, Cam Newton had an MVP season with a bunch of nobodies at wide receiver.
Yep.
Are they going to be able to do that again next year?
That's the thing.
Is Cam Newton going to be able to run roughshod over the league again?
All right, can Jonathan Stewart put up the kind of numbers he put up this year again next year, a year older, when nobody expected it out of him this year?
We outlined in the preview that Ted Ginn Jr. prior to this year had 11 career touchdowns. He had 10 this season. That's impossible. Like, people are going to try to clamp down on them. And you see, like, they see what the Broncos do, and you say, oh, rush the passer.
Yeah.
For a fact that everybody is going to start beefing up their defensive lines. And, I mean, it's no secret, again, that defense wins championships. It's an old cliche, but damn it if it doesn't work.
Like when it's right,
41 out of 50 Super Bowls have been won by the better defensive team.
Right. When it's in a percentage like that, which is basically 80%. Of all the Super Bowls have been won by the better defensive team. It might be a cliche, but it's there because it's true.
Exactly.
I'm thinking about it. I'm trying to think of teams like the Panthers who, like in baseball, we saw it with the Kansas City Royals. They made it to the World Series, came close, but ended up losing. Last year, they went over the hump and they won. I don't recall seeing that happen a lot in the NFL, where a team gets there and you go, they're really good, they'll be back, and they'll finally get over that hump. I'm trying to think back. I'm sure it has.
I mean, you would have thought that the Bills would have won one of those.
Right. There's a perfect example.
Maybe you say who? Not the Seahawks because they won and then lost.
Yeah, but
Broncos? Didn't the Broncos get to 3 consecutive and lose the first one?
No, they went to 86 and 87, skipped a year and went back in 89. They had to make sure they were there.
In the 90s, they just won the back-to-backs.
Won the back-to-backs, yeah. Yeah. I just don't know. I mean, like Seattle was a team that we knew were on the rise, and then when they got there, they won it. And then they got back again and lost.
I guess if you want to say that there's the example, it's these Broncos, right?
Yeah, or the Seahawks for that matter. But yeah, something like that. I mean, so it's possible.
Well, I mean, but the Seahawks won and then lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. Those are the examples I can think of off the top. Otherwise, teams have either won their first time and then won multiple, but. If you lose the first one, it's hard. But I guess the Panthers could look right across the field at Denver and say, they got blown out in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And I think that's something Ron Rivera said postgame, that they got, blown out in the Super Bowl in New York, and 2 years later they're here winning. So
yeah.
But the NFL's a volatile place. Teams come and go, players come and go quicker than ever before now, and we'll have one quick mention of that before we go. But In theory, Carolina can do it. In theory, they can. They have a quarterback that can do it. If the defense is still as good as it was this year, then as we've said, defense can carry you a long way. At least keep you in every single game. May not be able to win you all the games, but you can be competitive in games if you have a strong defense.
I think with the Panthers, it's a lot like what the Seahawks were a couple years ago. A lot of it's going to depend on where they are with salary cap and all that. If they've still got room to work with and they can keep the core of their team and maybe pick up a few guys, then probably yeah. But if they've got money issues, they got to start cutting people loose. That can change a lot of things. So I could see it going either way. I mean, like I said, this team was 7-8-1 2 years ago with basically the same cast of characters. So
right.
I think the Broncos, we've probably seen the last of them in the Super Bowl for a few years, I would guess.
Unless Brock Osweiler can take the reins.
Well, if he can
draft a dynamic offensive player in the offseason.
But if he can play a lot like he did during the regular season and just not get in the way of that defense, they could be right back again. Yeah. Who knows?
If this defense, if they can get the majority of this defense back and sign Von Miller and keep DeMarcus Ware and those guys, that defense can be just as good.
Yeah.
And Brock Osweiler will only have to do so much. And of course, the full offseason in camp and him knowing that he's the guy going into the season could change a whole lot of things. And then you look at that, but that NFC or AFC West. The Raiders are going to be a hard out, even harder out next year. The Chiefs, despite not having enough to win a Super Bowl, probably they have enough to be a very competitive team in plenty of games. There's no way the Chargers could be worse than they were this year.
I can't imagine it, but I'm not ruling out anything at this point.
Yeah, but with that lame duck season, they're going to be playing in San Diego.
Oh boy, I don't want to get into this role, but I think they're going to get a deal done in San Diego. I don't think they leave. I really do.
I don't know.
We'll see, but we'll leave that for down the road.
Yeah, when something happens there eventually.
Right.
But it's going to be hard. It'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. But Denver Broncos, Super Bowl 50 champions. Last bit of news before we go. The only other news really is going on. In the middle of Super Bowl 50, Marshawn Lynch decided to retire. He sent out a tweet with a picture of his cleats hung up over a wire, like you see in many inner-city neighborhoods with shoes thrown over utility wires. He just the peace out symbol for an emoji, and that was his last breath of air in the NFL. 9-year career. Did a lot of good things with he started out with the Bills, traded to the Seahawks, had a pretty substantial career with the Seahawks.
Made one of the greatest runs we've ever seen.
One of the greatest runs we've ever seen against the Saints.
Yep.
Entirely quotable for the rest of all sports. His press conferences will be legend, much like the Allen Iverson practice. People forever will be just there so they don't get fined. Yeah, what do you think of the 9-year career of Marshawn Lynch?
He had a pretty good career. I'd have to take a closer look at it to see if he's a guy we're going to be talking about for Hall of Fame down the road in 5 years. But one of the greatest runs I've ever seen in that Saints playoff game, the year that the Seahawks went 7-9 and then won in the playoffs and just made everybody really mad. Good player, definitely an interesting character, and I'm just curious if this is going to stick. Do you think he's really going to retire, or is this just He's not the kind of guy that would do this. So if he's done, he's done, I think. I don't think he's going to...
I think so, too.
Yeah.
In his career, 2,144 attempts for 9,112 yards, 74 touchdowns in his career. He averaged... Oh, that's attempts. What's his yards? Averaged 4.2 yards per carry in his career, 71.7 yards per game.
Sounds like he's going to be in the Hall of the Really Good, but probably not a Hall of Fame career.
No, he'll be the Hall of you remember him.
Yeah.
I think people will always remember Marshawn Lynch.
But, it's an interesting point, though, because we were talking about this on Bass last week. We've got another guy that is a big-name player that retired before anybody thought he would. It was Calvin Johnson and now Marshawn Lynch. And, like I think Mike brought it up, is this going to start a trend where we're going to see guys stepping out while they still can? So
maybe. I think for a running back, though, 9 years
that's in a long time.
Is a good clip.
Yep. Definitely,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, 127 games over 9 seasons.
Yeah.
He played just about every snap in all but 2 seasons. Well, I guess in that 2010 season he was traded midseason, so that's 16 games there. But he was injured this year, only the 7 games. I think he's never seemed like the sharpest tool in the shed to begin with. But I think he's also a smart guy to get out now and keep what he has left of him. And he's done a lot for inner city kids in Oakland. And, it'll be – I don't think he'll ever do anything in football. I don't think he's going to be like an ambassador or going to being part of an organization or anything like that. But, he'll be around probably helping his foundation and fade away into obscurity for a while.
I always forget that he started with the Bills. I always forget that. But, he
had 3.5 seasons with the Bills.
Definitely a character. Went to Cal, right? Isn't that where he was drafted? Yeah, okay.
Oakland Technical High School, and then went to Cal and to the Bills and Seahawks.
All right.
Super champion Marshawn Lynch, too.
There you go, yep. Got his ring and decided to call it a day. He's got his money, going to go home.
Mm-hmm. And, the Seahawks weren't going to keep him around anyway.
No.
They weren't going to pay for him next year anyway, so I think he got out and had a good time for all things considered.
He never struck me as a guy that football was all that important to. Like, no. he was good at it. He could play it. He's like, I'll do it to make some money, but I don't think it was his number one passion in life.
No, you're right. And I think you could see that with what he's done with his money and trying to help inner city kids, and that's where I think he's. From what I understand, he's very passionate about that aspect of things.
Good,
giving back to the community and doing all that sort of stuff. So, he's some people on the outside might think he's an idiot or sounds like an idiot, but at his core, he's a good guy that wants to help people out. And I think that's the most important thing.
Yep, I agree.
And hopefully he doesn't get CTE late, but only 29 years old and retiring from the NFL.
All right.
But that's it. That's the end of the season, Greg.
Yeah.
Season 3 of Basically the Football Show is in the books.
Yep.
Next thing we have on the calendar is the draft, which is in May now, correct? Maybe we'll do a draft show in the off season if we come to it, but that ends season 3 of Basically a Football Show. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always fun. For
Greg, I'm Zach. This is Basically a Football Show, season 3. Any last words before we go off into our off-season training program?
See you next year.
See you next year, guys.